Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Art Talks, proudly sponsored by I2 Art Insure. We're specialist insurers that look after all types of art insurance for galleries, for individuals, for transit. If you have purchased any work at the fair and you need insurance cover to get it home, we have a QR code that you can scan for instant cover. I'd also invite you to enter our competition for our bespoke gin. And also to take a goodie bag. So inside our bags that we've given out, it looks like a business card, but it's not a business card, it's an RFID card. So what you do is you put it next to your bank cards, and it stops anyone being able to tap, without your knowledge. So very useful to protect your cards there. Welcome to our panelists, and thank you very much for joining us. I hope you enjoy.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. My name is Heba Elkayal. I'm a curator, writer from Egypt. And with us today is Bernardo Follini, a curator from Fondazione Sandretto Re Rebaudengo in Turin. We have with us Khwezi Gule, chief curator of the Johannesburg Art Gallery. Wim Pijibes, director from Droom and Daad in Rotterdam. And Raphael Chikukwa, the Executive Director and Chief Curator from the National Gallery of Zimbabwe. Thank you so much for being with us today. The topic of our conversation for the next hour is Curatorial Chronicles. And as a curator myself, I think the topic is relevant because what we mean by curating is many, many things beyond simply just putting together a few paintings on a wall. I think that the challenges of curating are many, and in today's time where we have social media and visitors coming in expecting to see certain things for the sake of putting it on Instagram, for instance, or you have promotional material going out into the world about exhibitions, people's demands, expectations, audience expectations, museum ambitions, governments, a lot of factors determine and influence what we do as curators, and certainly pose quite a few challenges to us. So with me today are a great group of people to speak to many of these points and issues. So I'll start off my conversation with the question of, what do you believe your respective institutions uniquely offer visitors? And how do you try to maintain that offering? Raphael, perhaps I can start with you on that subject.
Thank you very much, Heba. And firstly, let me thank the Art Fair for this invitation. But I'm sure you touched, firstly, when you talked about the expectations of our institutions, maybe public or non-public. For us, and for me as the Executive Director of the National Gallery of Zimbabwe, you're looking at a public institution that was founded way in 1950s before independence of Zimbabwe. And the founding curator or director, Frank McEwen, who did set the bar of what the mission and the expectations of the National Gallery. And for us, it's basically trying to follow the blueprint that was left by Frank McEwen to make sure that at least the public that comes into the National Gallery appreciates and get inspired by the work that we do, but most importantly, the work that the artists do, because the artists give birth to these works. And for us, as National Gallery, I want to say that the gallery workers, especially the curators, the curatorial team, we are Muhammad. And for our prayers to be answered, we need to go to the mountain, and the mountain is the artist. And so our relationship with the artists is also very, very key, because when we do go to the mountains to pray, we get the answers and to be able to continue the work that we do.
One question that first springs to mind about a gallery that was set up in the 50s, you said, in what is historically a very interesting time across the continent in Africa. Could you perhaps speak to us a little bit about some of sort of the national intentions, the post-colonial time, post-colonial fervor of independence, of identity and nation building that perhaps inspired some of these ideas with the founding of the museum?
Well, let me go back to when the gallery was founded. It was officially opened in 1957, but the idea was mooted way before 1957. And as a British colony, the British Empire used to send work to the colony. And the work was kept at the town house in Harare. And the idea, and then with the funds that were put together by trust, they then decided to build this iconic building, which is one of the modernist buildings that we have in the continent, and with the architect Peter Oldfield, who was the brain behind the building. And then to look for a director, who then they managed to find Frank McEwen, who was half French, half British, looking after the Henry Moore collection in Paris, and was the director of the British Council. And he had to sail all the way from Europe to come to foresee the construction of the building. And during that time, they decided that the first exhibition at the National Gallery was going to be from Rembrandt to Picasso. And later on, it was officially opened by the Queen Mother then. And to cut the long story short, Frank McEwen was able to bring the European modernists into Zimbabwe. And later on, he formulated an art school that also gave birth to a number of modernists that include Kingsley Sambo and many others. And then brought a big conference which was called the International Congress on African Cultures. That brought Alfred Barr, who was the founding MoMA director, to Harare, to Salisbury at that time. And Roland Penrose, who was at ICI, and many others. But also to say, Frank McEwen was very influential, including people like NASA, Senghor, and others, because they started the Black Orpheus, which was a journal that played a very important role about the issues to do with identity, African art, and others were included, Uli Baya and others. But when independence, well, later on, Frank McEwen was fired by Ian Smith, and he had to sail back to Europe. But I'm sure the misunderstandings between Ian Smith and Frank McEwen went deeper. But we still celebrate the contribution of Frank McEwen, because what he left, even the archive that we still have, is what also inspires us. So we were able to do the International Congress on African Cultures in 2017 and in 2022. But when independence came, the relationship between Zimbabwe and other SADC countries, including many other countries that contributed to the liberation of the country. So the collections that we have in the National Gallery include some of the South African modernists, Ghanaian modernists, Nigerians, Benanwenu, and Selby Mvusi. And earlier on, Sam was talking about, Bill Ensley, who was also part and parcel of the contribution of the workshops that started in Zimbabwe, which was the Pachipangwe, that also brought the likes of Chris Ofili. The first elephant dung paintings were done by Chris Ofili, and they were done in Cyrene. And the people like Bill Ensley were very influential. People like David Kolowani, the late, played a very important role in making sure that at least the visibility of Southern African artists in Zimbabwe was very, very pivotal, and also the likes of Bongit Lomo and many others.
Well, it's incredible because you've just sort of given us and painted a history of an institution that is actually evolving also and responding to the needs of a postmodern museum and a postmodern art world as well. I'll come back to you, but I'm curious to hear from Khwezi on this point. How do you make a national gallery relevant and interesting to an art audience today?
Okay, so just a little bit of background. So the Johannesburg Art Gallery started out as a colonial institution in 1910. And over the years, it has evolved. But when 1994, which is the year of our first democratic elections, came about, I would say that there wasn't really a very concrete vision for what this gallery should look like for the new democracy. So the people who were chief curators at various stages from then until now have sort of crafted more or less on their own what it is that they think the gallery should do. Now, the tricky part also is that while we are trying to do all of these things, we are also dealing with a decline in state funding. So we do understand that there's a bigger demand for social transformation, but the question of how does that social transformation manifest itself in our day-to-day operations has been quite a challenge. So we do, for instance, do more exhibitions of younger artists. We do quite a lot of programs, but we also have begun to open up to people who would be not your traditional art audiences. So let me just give you an illustration of something that happened the past weekend. On Saturday, the 10th of February, we had a concert by a well-known South African jazz vocalist called Gabi Mtuba, and that brought a whole set of people to the gallery. And on the very next day, there was a church group that came to the JAG to have a church service. So we haven't really formulated what it is exactly what we do with these various people who clearly have a connection with the building and with the gallery, but who have not been part of the planning before. So the question that we are facing is, how do we cater for a broader spectrum of society rather than just the narrow interest of the traditional art audience?
But I also think what you're saying is, how do we make a museum play different roles in society? How do you make the museum itself, as a building, as a structure, as a space, as a site, relevant to different audiences? And having a church group come in, I mean, that must be something, because JAG is a wonderful building, and to have a group singing in there, I would imagine, is quite an experience. Bernardo, if I can ask you, talking about museums as spaces and a site of learning, discovery, and exchange, how has that changed over the past 10 years for yourself and for your work and your museum?
Yeah. First of all, I work for Fondazione Sandretto Re Rebaudengo, which is a private foundation in Turin, born from a private collection. So it has been established in 1995. So there is this, private status. But at the same time, the main interest and intention for this foundation was not to display in a permanent way this private collection, but was actually to produce a sort of promotion and valorization in Italian's contemporary art, which at the time was a very poor of infrastructure in relation to museum, and especially build a bridge between the audiences, the communities, and contemporary art. For this reason, since the beginning, there has been a huge attention in relation to education, educational departments, and cultural mediation, which is really something unique at least at the time in Italy for an institution. So I would say that the question that museums, at least I of course know pretty well Italian scene, I know a bit more European scene and less other scenes, but the question that they have been asking themselves for the last 20 years in relation to what has been named new institutionalism, so a moment in which cultural institutions became more aware of the power structure that they were representing, and at the same time it has been a moment for the production of self-criticality within the institutions. And
Go ahead, sorry.
No, and at the time there was this question by the Belgian thinker Chantal Mouffe whether a cultural institution could be or not sites for produce counter-hegemonical knowledge production and distribution models. So I think this question is still relevant. But today, what we are doing at Fondazione, it's maybe the experience that I can share with you is really trying to think curating at the intersection with this pedagogical aspect. And so the project we did that I feel are the most representative of our approach were the ones in which we didn't have that kind of hierarchy of curatorial department who produce the contents, and then you have educational department, but really to work together on the themes, on the artist, and especially with a commitment on long-term projects. And coming back to the question, I really think that, for example, in Italy, there are still things of, contemporary history which are not inside, school books. And having the opportunity, for example, to speak about Italian colonialism through artistic perspective and having them, kids or children or people in the formation period, having a chance to access these contents through the critical lens of the artist and of the projects is already something in relation to which kind of society we are producing. And so, yeah, I would say that at least I am still thinking about that question by Chantal Mouffe in relation to what an institution can do, but quite also aware of, but maybe this is something we can explore later, also about, the appropriation dynamics that a cultural institution, or especially a private institution, could do in relation to social or political contents.
Wim, can I ask you to also perhaps speak to this question?
Yes, my current job is director of a philanthropic foundation, Droom and Do. However, my former job was general director of the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. And when I came there and started in 2008, the museum was closed already for 5 years for renovation. And it was at the time that the openings date was not on the horizon. So I had a hard job to think what will the future of this institution be. And talking to many people, the staff, the curators, the audiences, all kind of stakeholders, I came to the conclusion that it all came together in one word, and that was open. And that's an easy word, it's a nice word, it's a word that is the same in many languages, and I thought open is what is needed to be relevant as an institution, as the National Museum, as a Rijksmuseum is. And what does open mean? And I thought, okay, open in the case of the Rijksmuseum is threefold. First, of course, the building should be open, should be reopened. I mean, that's what you, as a museum, you are, in most cases, you are a building where art and people connect. So the museum as a building should open. but it was not enough. By open, I also meant that the collection, I mean the real value of the museum is not the building, it's the collection. It's what you have to show, it's the content. And content is key, content is king. And so you should open up that content, and how could you do that? Taking you all back to 2008, 2009, I mean, internet was early days. I mean, the iPhone was just...
Not even out.
Well, it was out in 2008, but it was early days for digital, I mean, social media, etc. I mean, it was, we're now at 2024, but 2008 it was, well, anyway. So we thought, okay, we have this collection of 1.1 million objects. How can we share that with the audience, and how can we make this accessible to the world? And open is what you need. So we decided to make a radical approach, and to make the whole collection digitally photographed, and we put it on the web on a very nice website, free for all, no copyright, no restrictions. You can use any image of the Rijksmuseum collection for anything that you could think of, even commercial use. It's free for all. Because we thought, okay, if the imagery is out there, the authentic value, the authentic object is in the building. So it's a kind of long-term making people hungry for the real thing. That's another key thing to museums. They are the gatekeepers of true and authentic values. I mean, they have the objects. So sooner or later, you want to stand eye in eye with the real things. So open the building, open the collection, and the third thing that we had to work on was open the attitude. So the National Museum, the Rijksmuseum, should no longer be what we call the Ministry of Good Taste. We know it all. We know what's good, and we know what's right, and we know what's best. Okay, to a certain extent, that's still true. I mean, however, we're open to share that vision and taste of children, or anyone could have an opinion about a painting and say, okay, I like this one and I don't like that one. Yeah, I'm a curator or I'm a director. So, yeah, it's a good point to start a conversation. Why do you like that better than that one? And I can say, okay, the Milkmaid or Rembrandt is a better painting than that. But who am I to say that? I mean, I can explain it to you, but taste is something very nice to discuss. So open the building, open the collection, open the attitude of the whole institution. So the whole key thing for museums at that time, but still is, I think, is to be open to audiences, open to new developments in time, open to new ideas. So open. That's to me what it's all about.
The matter of opening the copyright and use of the images of the artworks was quite radical.
Yeah.
And it was the first done, I mean, you were the first museum to do this.
Yeah.
And it must have been a nightmare for your lawyers, your art lawyers, to set this up. But, I mean, what do you think the impact of that is? What can you proudly say resulted in opening the museum in this way? Because since then, museums around the world have really changed, and you led that change.
Yeah, I mean, the whole radical idea to change it into free-for-all openness was that if you look for an image of the Vermeer, the Milkmaid, I mean, the Milkmaid, there are already thousands of these images all over the place on the web, but bad quality. Because illegal copies of copies of copies. I mean, it's all there. Picasso's, I mean, everything that is restricted by copyrights, it's all there. It's all in the open. If you Google any image, it's all there. So we thought, okay, if you want to use it or enjoy it or be in contact with an artwork, why not provide the best quality of it? I mean, it's the image, it's not the artwork. So, yeah, why not share it and be generous and share it with the world? So if you want to use for an essay or for a presentation or what, you want to have an image of the Milkmaid or a Rembrandt, use the best one. And yes, we're happy to supply that to you. So why not?
And when the museum reopened, how do you feel what was the impact of all this, the change of this attitude from high up on audiences, on the sorts of exhibitions you held, on visitors?
Yeah, successful. Sounds a bit odd to say that, but it was successful also threefold. I mean, what are metrics for success? In a way, to my opinion, that has to do with three elements. Again, it's public, so it's P. It's press. I mean, you need a critical reply from well. So press is good, public is good, and the peer group is good. If you can cater all these three, then you may say, yes, you did a great job. And well,
You did do
it
a
sounds a
great
bit
job.
stupid to say from your own thing, but I'm happy that all these three were happy and were satisfied, and even more than we expected at forehand. So yes, I'm very proud that it turned out to be a success in that sense. Yeah.
What do you think, and this is a question for all four speakers, what do you think the most important element of the role of a curator-director is, and what do you strive to achieve in these roles?
Well, it's a very powerful question, and for me, I remember very much when I joined the National Gallery, and why I joined the National Gallery was for me to continuously ask myself, why am I here, and what do I want to do, and what do I want to achieve? And I was able to, when I arrived at the National Gallery in 2010, was to put a why on my office. Why am I here? To continuously remind myself. Because I was coming from another 10 years of being an independent curator. And it was my first job to work in a national institution. And many people thought I was not going to last. But
Did you find the answer on that question?
I'm still, I would say yes, I did, because I was coming back from overseas, and you're coming back from a country which is, the political situation was very unstable, the economic situation very unstable, but how do you make lemonade out of the lemons? And the lemons were the artist. And that's how I was able to give birth to the Zimbabwe Pavilion at the Venice Biennale. And then, because you're also looking at a situation of saying it's a country that has been isolated from the international community. And how do we get it back into the international community? But I will also go back to the idea that it was also looking at the archive of how and why did Frank McEwen be able to take Zimbabwean art into the Rodin Museum, into the ICI in London, into MoMA. So before technology was born, and he was able to do that. So that's why continuously ring in my bell. And as I walk into my small little office upstairs, was to look at that and to be able to find answers. But also to say, how do I relate to the artist? And so I did manage to find the answer, but I'm still looking for more answers to be able to continue when I took over the directorship just during COVID. And so you're also still struggling with a very constipated economic situation. And I'm happy that we still continue to do our Zimbabwe Pavilion at the Venice Biennale, and we are also happy to say the current artistic director, Adriano Pedrosa, had to choose 5 artists. But how do you continue to work in a public institution that is underfunded, like what Khwezi has said? Because funding is a very, it oils your day-to-day practice, and it oils the day-to-day visibility of your institution. But when you have very little funding, sometimes you say, okay, but what can I do? And we also started a public program which is called Harare Conversations that has been able to bring a number of international curators to Harare. And also another project which is basically based on opening up other curators from other countries to be able to bring new energy into the Zimbabwean art scene, because I also believe that fertility will always come from outside. And so we are still battling with the current situation, but when people ask us and say, but how do you make this possible? And I'm always saying that where you see problems, I see opportunities. But I really love my colleague when he was talking about open. We also need to continuously open up the institution to our local audience, and also for open to international artists, because the traffic of international artists during the colonial era has always been there. And we can't, as much as the isolation was there, but we managed to open up, and, curators from Simon Jami, Christine Eyene, Gabi, and many others, the traffic continue to come into a country, and the growth of the art practice in Zimbabwe today is also, the artists, I want to respect them because they've not given up their practice because the economic situation is not good, but they continue to produce, and they continue to inspire the work we do at the gallery. And the other Zimbabwean artists, I can see Gillian Roselli here, who is also going to represent our country. But these are the people that inspires the work that you do as a director, to say, how can we make them visible? And how can we also open up our archive? Because the archive of the National Gallery of Zimbabwe that was left for many years, and earlier on people were talking about legacies, it is very important to continue to archive, because it's there to inspire the future generation. I'm sure cultural institutions in Africa, we know that we continue to struggle from underfunded, but let's strive to make sure that our collaboration with artists and the archiving of the memory is a key driver.
Absolutely agree. With archives being in such disarray throughout the continent, it's more important than ever to preserve these archives. And I think you mentioned something that's really crucial. And unfortunately, archives have been lost over the past 50 years, and it makes the preservation of artists and their works much more difficult. So I can absolutely agree with you on that point. It's of utmost importance. Raphael, what would you say drives you as a director? Oh, I'm sorry.
It's not me, it's Khwezi.
Sorry.
Just quickly, on the 3rd of February, we also had an event called Sip and Paint. And for me, that was a kind of a revelation, because that wasn't necessarily, in fact, it wasn't an idea that came from me. It came from two ladies who were sitting there at the back. One is Sia and the other one is Banele. And they wanted to have an event where people who are not art trained can just come and do some painting, playful, and sip on some wine and juice, and So for me, that was a revelation, because it brought a whole new group of people that I didn't know before. And so I think some of the chance taking is important, even though you don't know what the result is going to be, but to sort of do these kinds of experiments to see what comes out of it. The other thing which I just want to piggyback again on is the fact that the Rijksmuseum was closed for how many years? Almost 10 years? Yes. So people who are losing their minds over the Johannesburg Art Gallery must just calm down. But to answer your question now directly, so I think every head of every institution in South Africa needs to do two things which are extremely difficult. The first one is to address what we popularly call in South Africa the national question. Now, the national question in broad strokes is we come from this history of pain and suffering. We need to move to a history where everybody in society is recognized. Their traditions, their ways of life, their thinking, and their ideas are equally represented in the institutions, social institutions. While you're trying to do that, you also have to reach out and try to push the envelope as much as you can in terms of innovating on the types of exhibitions that you want to have, the types of programs that you want to have, and be part of the global conversation. Now, each one of those things is a nightmare on its own, but I think this is the challenge that we, as head of institutions, I don't care if you're a hospital or a prison or a gallery, this is the challenge that is facing you. And if we do not answer that question, we are actually laying the seeds for the devolution of society into where we come from, and we don't want to do that. So for me, the why that Raphael Chikukwa was talking about is to answer those two questions. How do we do both at the same time?
Wim?
Yeah, agree, totally agree. And I think, well, museums, let me have a point in the future. I think museums should take a role and maybe lead the path to that future. I mean, we live in a global world, yes. However, political reality nowadays is that borders are made. It's more difficult to move over the globe. It's nationalism. It's right-wing governments are coming. I mean, in the Netherlands and Italy. Don't know what in the US will happen. So, yeah, and museums could play a small role maybe, but to keep the world open and to keep things flowing and people and thoughts and ideas, because that is the energy that is needed to move forward. And we all are living creatures, and living means moving forwards. I mean, that's the whole concept of living. I mean, you live towards the future, not to the past. So if we want to live ahead and forward, do forward thinking, and what is needed is that you connect with different people from different backgrounds and different cultures. So here again, the key word is open. Yeah. Open to things that you don't know, ideas that you maybe not like, but have the conversation and open up to all these strange, crazy ideas that happen in the world, and start to connect with all these things. And yeah, the museums could be the places to accommodate this whole process on a small scale. I mean, yes, we have to be modest, but anyway, it should be. It should happen, and I think the world needs that more than ever, maybe, because, yeah, as you said, if we don't do that, and if we all go back to our own borders, behind our countries, and protect what we have, then, yeah, that's the beginning of the end.
I think it's interesting how museums have become a forum for dialogue and exchange, because there are no other alternative spaces, and what alternative spaces there were have diminished. Even universities have becoming problematic areas where some dialogue and exchange can't even happen. And so maybe actually the role of the museum in the future is going to be even more than simply showcasing art, as we are seeing today anyways. I mean, these are questions that we're considering and talking about. These weren't questions that museum directors considered.
Let me respond on that. I mean, yeah, museums in the old way were places to show art and to bring in people. That's it. Okay, but I think we moved, and we're now working on what is called the third generation museums. And I think these new generation of museums are exactly the places where it's not about buying a ticket get inside, see a painting, and go home. No, you go there, you connect, and you are part of a larger thing. So I think that we move forward from visitors to audiences to communities, and I think we're still in that process, maybe between these audiences and communities. But I hope that museums could be a place where community building could be made, and the old concept of a museum where you have paintings and visitors. I think we move to a situation in the near future, I hope, where there is culture to be shared with communities, and that's the movement that's the process where we are in.
Yeah, Bernardo, being at the helm of a private institution, what do you feel the role of private institutions are? You know, when national galleries have challenges that are sort of dictated by outside entities like state funding, or, you know, sometimes museums, national museums could be mouthpieces for governments almost in a way. I mean, you know, how do you feel a private foundation can play a role in the matter that we were just discussing?
Yeah, first of all, I totally agree with what you said, and yeah, I think it's one of our main role and you know, possibility to have an impact is to build collaboration between private museums and public museums, but at the same time still feeling the responsibility that we have as a cultural institution, in the sense that, of course, being a public institution should make even more aware of this, but at the same time, being private, having you know, the privilege to do this takes also another scale of responsibility on this, and I'm saying this also because we are well aware that museums, contemporary art, culture in general, play a crucial role in the legitimation of specific politics, and in general, they do really shape society. They do not just mirror society, they shape society. So, first of all, I think we should ask ourselves always about this idea of commitment, accountability, and responsibility. That's why I'm interested in the way you were speaking about how the audiences has changed, and I really like this notion of counter publics, with this idea that audiences have of course their own agency, so they can really react and you know, they are not just visiting; they are having their dialogue. They are creating dialogues, but at the same time forcing discourses in order to enter to the institution. And I think that maybe something that is something that I'm reflecting on recently is that maybe another action which is possible for the museum is to stop focusing on force the people to come into the museum and try, you know, to think more about going out from the museum. I just have this example of a project we did within a framework of this project, this collaboration with the Youth Policies Department of the Piedmont region, which is the region of Turin, in which we were invited by Friday for Future summer camp in Turin to participate in the campus and to organize a workshop with an artist. So we had at the time this exhibition, which was named Something in the Air, and we had this huge sculpture, which was an inflatable sculpture in the shape of an hammer by the collective Tools for Action. And so we invited this collective to organize a workshop with the activists of Friday for Future during the summer camp, and then we moved the work from the exhibition to the demonstration. So at the end, this artwork became this sort of iconic symbol of this demonstration, and So at the same time, we were invited by a specific community to interact with them, starting from our expertise in relation to artistic production and production of knowledge, and at the same time, we provide this work that was inside the museum. So I think that another element of this debate could be which is our role outside the museums. And maybe I just say last thing that because of course this is something that I really think about when you focus a lot. Of course, it depends between private and public. Speaking for myself and for the institution I work in, the idea of taking inside and also should raise question in relation to what you are doing really and which kind of capitalization are you doing with this within this framework. So of course it's always there is always this idea of the institution as a platform for visibility and production of discourses to welcome publics or counter-publics, but at the same time this idea of appropriating or producing capital on it is always there. So I think that this is a contradiction that at least, I mean, that it's there. So in a way, I would also suggest to look at it through other actions or directions.
The question of audiences dictating what they'd like to see, not just what they need from the museum, is interesting because the expectation is that not the expectation, people would like to see certain things, and as curators we sort of struggle intellectually, academically maybe, with whether we would want to present or give airtime to a specific sort of movement or thought or curatorial direction. And I wonder, how often do you feel compelled to respond to what you think an audience would like to see, and what that means for, in your role as a museum leader? Do you feel that you are obligated to do that, and in sort of to what extent?
If you put this question to, let's say, the culinary world, and if a museum would be a restaurant, and if you let the audience ask, what would you like to have for dinner tonight? Yes, I think there are restaurants who are doing that. Some of them have this big sign. Yeah, sometimes you might do that. I mean, that's the easy fast food, the fast art thing. I mean, that's nothing against that. And we all know these works of art, whether it was the Girl with the Pearl or the Night Terrace, the Van Goghs, the Dogs and Cats by the Impressionists. I mean, you can do shows like that and attract 100,000 visitors. And now and then you can do that. I mean, why not? It's a first, for many people, it's a first contact with art. So it's about a balance. I mean, yes, now and then you have, as a national institution, you have the responsibility to have, well, sometimes to do music for the millions, but not only. Now and then also you have to challenge your audience with bringing new art or new perspectives, and you as a curator or a museum, you are in the field of having a wider and a broader view of what's going on in the world. I mean, you're a specialist in a way. So, yeah, I would say it's in the balance. It's not that or that. It's you can do songs for the millions, but now and then you have to challenge and do something very unexpected.
Refined.
Yeah.
Raphael?
Yeah, well, it's just like you rightly say, you have to keep the balance. And for me, I just look at myself as a visual DJ. You play certain songs at a certain time. And that has come, it's another challenge, especially, I mean, for us, because we have been doing the Venice Biennale, and then you've got people asking you, why are you not taking this artist, and why have you chosen this artist, and this artist is good. And you say, well, I'm a visual DJ, I play certain songs at a certain time. And sometimes you also need to keep your ear on the ground. As you keep your ear on the ground, you also need to look at what is happening globally and look at the artists, what they are producing. And also, one of the bigger things you need to think about is also to challenge your audience and to surprise your audience, because it's not always, you cannot please everyone. It's very difficult. If you're going to work and say, I'm going to please the rest of South African people or Zimbabwean people, then as a cultural leader, you are bound to fail. And it will be a recipe for disaster. But we strive to do our best as cultural leaders, especially, I mean, my colleague Khwezi, I mean, well, including my European colleagues, because I'm sure the issue of museums being underfunded, I'm sure the crisis across the globe is only affecting us, but it's also affecting everybody else. But as much as for us, we work from shoestring budgets to make things possible, but it should not be an excuse for mediocrity. We must strive to make good shows and to make sure that at least we continue to challenge this audience that comes through our doors.
Beautiful words. Khwezi?
In the case of the Johannesburg Art Gallery, we have traditionally had, traditionally set aside certain spaces for what we call the curriculum exhibition. Some of the works that are in the school's curriculum, there's two examination boards in South Africa. There's the state one, and then there's another one called IEP. And some of the works that are in our collection are in both of those examination boards' curricula. And so for us, it's a public service that we do to make sure that when children want to see a Gerard Sokoto, they don't rely on what they see in a book, but they see it physically. And for me, as a young aspirant artist, going to a gallery and seeing all of these works, for me, was life-changing. So I feel, and I think the rest of the staff at the Johannesburg Art Gallery feels very strongly that in as much as we try to do these other things which are more exciting, but we should not ever lose sight of the fact that there are school children, many of them from so-called disadvantaged backgrounds, who come to our institution because for them it is a learning opportunity.
Thank you. Does anybody have any question for our speakers? Please, go ahead, sir.
You were talking about the third generation museums. I would like to hear more about that, because I am aware that you are opening a new museum in Rotterdam. In what sense would that depict, or you would let loose that third generation thought of a museum? Wim.
I don't know yet. I mean, there is what I would call a first generation museum. That's the 19th century National Ministry of Good Taste, National Gallery London, the Louvre, the Rijksmuseum, that whole generation of museums. Then you have the second, the 20th century museums, the mostly museums of modern art in the capitals, mostly in Europe, the US. And now we have the third generation. And what's that? That's where people, as an average, there's not a certain formula, but it's shaping now. And what I see, what will be that third generation be? I think that's still a place where people come, not per se for the art only, but it's where they spend, let's say, as an average 2 hours, like in the old days, but they are not 2 hours in front of a painting. They are, let's say, 1 hour in front and in between the arts. They are spending time in a restaurant, listening to someone, maybe doing a workshop, or being, just being. And having said that, I think that museums are more moving to places, from places where you see to places where you are, where you be. So from seeing to being, that might be a bit the whole process where we are in. And the third generation museum is, to my opinion, a place to accommodate that. And yeah, but how will that take place? I mean, here in Cape Town we have the site Smoka. I think that's a new generation museum. I would call it a third generation museum because yes, there is art. Yes, there are places to be. Yes, there is food. Yes, you can go there for the architecture, or you can go there even to meet other people. So when all this comes together in a kind of cultural place, to feed the brain and to get inspired, to see new things, and to have the wow factor. And after the visit, you can say, I have been there. Not I have seen that and that. No, I have been there. And I think that's what we move. So to conclude, I think the third generation will be a place where people after their visit say, yes, we've been there.
Yes?
I have a question which is half a question and half a conjecture. So from what I understand in terms of the power of curatorship, it suffered a setback after the financial crisis of 2008 when there was the withdrawal of a lot of state funding. But it also liberated, curators then went to look for corporate funding. But it also created you were talking about the third space. It's also created a new generation of curators. And if I recall, the Fondazione Sandretto Re Rebaudengo did a wonderful project in 2016, or was part of it, called Going Public in Sheffield, in which, yes, people travel and they go to spaces and these spaces transform. But in this case, it was the idea of privately funded and publicly minded, and the fact that the works started to move. So, it dissolved the borders even more, and private collections loaned their works to public spaces in cities that were not central, where most of the museums are, the capitals. These were the regional museums or the regional spaces that have been forgotten when the state funding was withheld. So maybe when you talk about third spaces, they are even mobile spaces, and the curators have enormous power in trying to shape that. But I don't know, it's an idea.
That was a very interesting project, also related to the collection, because there is the collection which is not on permanent display at the foundation. We do organize a lot of shows of the collection abroad. In that case, there was this amazing dialogue with the church. And so there has been a long process, but I totally agree, and in a way also is something related to what I was saying before in relation to this other action of going outside, and specifically I also think that the idea of producing new site-specific works or conversation, public programs outside the institution is really something relevant today, because it's about regaining the public space in relation to the notion of citizenship, basically, and we have worked also a lot in relation to questioning what's public in a city, like in relation to the debate around the monuments or the streets, which of course also in Italy is very relevant in the public debate. And we are currently working on a new project that will be again next year in the public space, focusing on the history of Italy, also in the with the idea to challenge this idea of Italianness, or how our nationality has been built through historical process, but also through narrative processes. So yeah, I think I completely agree with this interpretation.
I'm sure I just wanted to contribute to your, to say something about your contribution, because as cultural institutions, we also need to ask ourselves, how can our collections work for us? Because in most instances, the collections, they gather dust. They never seen by audiences for a long time. But we need constantly to ask this question to ourselves, how can these collections work for the institutions? We have got a project where we loan our collections to banks and other institutions, so that at least you can free the space. Not only that, but you can also make that collection visible outside the gallery walls.
Khwezi?
Okay, so there's a, I won't call it an elephant, but there's a hippo in the room. And that is, okay, so we have a very large collection. In fact, the issue was brought up briefly in the other conference that took place a couple of days ago, where at least one institution admitted that they don't have large collections, private institution admitted that they don't have a large collection. And so they are drawing on the collections, the public collections, in order to make their exhibitions. And so we find ourselves in a situation where there's an unequal relationship between the private institutions and public institutions, where sometimes it just feels like the public institutions or private institutions just see public collections as a kind of just an open source thing.
Room.
Sorry?
Like an old stock room filled with
where
things,
they can just pick whatever they want and then they show it. And the thing that I want to actually just raise is that it's not that when they are loaning collections, in fact, there's another company that is an Italian company that's showing different, our collection in different museums. Right now the collection is in South Korea, but it was in Turin not so long ago. So the thing that I want to raise is that collections are not just objects. It's also people's time. The officials who are working in the museums, the amount of time that they have to navigate all of the bureaucracy and all of the getting permissions and all of these kinds of things. And that time is often not compensated for. Secondly, keeping a collection costs money also, because you've got to do fumigation, temperature, humidity control, and all of these things, which also cost money. And again, that is never that never is part of the conversation between private and public institutions. The attitude, I feel, and I may be wrong, is that, oh, well, these things are public goods anyway, so why don't we just, So I think that there needs to be some sensitivity to the fact that in as much as our public institutions are being defunded, there has been also a capitalization of private institutions by actually state institutions. So I think that relationship is something that we do need to spend quite some time on to make sure that the one sector is not acting in a parasitic manner on another, on the public sector.
That's very well put. One last thought I have, and maybe you might have some responses to this, is that we have a Venice Biennial coming up with a topic of visitors from the Global South is the curator's ambition for the biennial this year. And so with such a heavy emphasis on the Global South and with us being in South Africa, what do you think is the importance of cultural dialogue, and what do you think Cape Town's position and place in that global dialogue can be, has been, And what about other sites on the continent that are integral to this dialogue? And I open this up to all of you.
I am ashamed to say the Johannesburg Art Gallery and generally South African institutions have not done a very good job of reaching across our borders in terms of our own cooperation. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is that I feel that the relationship, even though there is a kind of a sea change in Europe about how to engage with the global south, I think that the hang-ups from the past are still there. There's still an unspoken sort of paternalism, especially if the one set of group of people have got money and the others are seen to be going around with a begging bowl. So those kinds of dynamics need to be dealt with. But the thing that I'm trying to raise is that unless we, as Africans in particular, have a strong standpoint on our own, then it's going to be so much more difficult for others to dictate our agenda. Earlier on today, Raphael Chikukwa and I were speaking to another friend of ours about the whole restitution process and how in many ways, even when European institutions and governments are trying to do the right thing, the conversation is still unbalanced. So, so I think that the intra-continental dialogue has got to be so much more stronger. And so that when we go to, when we encounter European institutions or American institutions, we go there with a unified voice and with much clearer agenda.
It's like when people asked me whether I was coming to the Cape Town Art Fair, I said no. And I'm sure, Khwezi, you managed to hit it right there, because I'm sure we meet more in Europe than we meet in Africa.
Yes, that we do.
And this is good that we are discussing, or we are bringing this question right here in South Africa. I would like to pay homage to the late David Kolowane, and also to my sister Bongi Lomo, and Selby Mvusi, the late. Mr. Silva, and why I'm mentioning these names is also because I want to relate this especially well to Zimbabwe, where we are just a stone throw from South Africa. My brother here, I remember when I organized another conference in Zimbabwe, I said, no, I'm busy. I said, you know what? If you don't come to Zimbabwe, I will not come to South Africa. And why I've mentioned the likes of David, Bongi, Selby Mvusi, Bill Ensley, it's also because these are very important personalities that have frequented Zimbabwe. Malangatana, Twin 77, they saw Zimbabwe as their home. So the cancer that is here in South Africa, and in particular some younger artists, they don't see anything else besides South Africa. And there's a need for us to have Africa to Africa connection. And that Africa to Africa connection will make us stronger. And this dialogue we're talking about can be possible, because this idea of us being howled out of the continent by Europeans to Germany, to Paris, to whatever, we will continue to remain passengers in our own ship. And it's not good for this dialogue. The dialogue needs to happen here first before it happens abroad.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time and your words and your contributions. I think I could continue this conversation for another 2 hours, but we must wrap up. And thank you all for your attendance and your questions. Thank you.